And we are continuing our conversation on sports and the role of sport in the development of children, as well as the pride of a people, a nation. Ray Wicksell and Jean Verster are with me here. You were talking about Ezekiel Sipeng earlier on and the other athletes that you've worked with. You know, just tell me a little bit more about the highlights of your coaching career.
Yeah, I was kind of an incidental coach because I couldn't run anymore, and at that stage I was coaching myself with a little group of athletes. So when I got injured with my Achilles tendon, I eventually just got into the coaching. But yeah, Ezekiel was one of my first top athletes, and consequently, you know, we worked with a lot of good athletes, including the last few years with Caster Semenya. She was with us for probably 3.5 years. And Nigel Amos from Botswana, Andre Olivier, 800 bronze medalist at Commonwealth Games, Elroy Geland. So there's been quite a few, and I absolutely enjoy it.
And for you, Ray, your highlights of being in the sport? I know that you were good friends with Sydney Marais, for instance,
Absolutely.
who left South Africa and went on to make us feel proud as South Africans when he was in the US.
Yeah, he was a great athlete. He's back in South Africa now, but I never really was a coach like John. I was more or less an agent. I represented Oscar Pistorius for many years, turned him into a global icon when he was very young. But mainly I'm involved in business at the moment, and what I try to do is go to the schools and talk to the young kids about being a champion, not only in sport, but also in business. Because, you know, not everybody could be a champion, but everybody can go and be a champion when it comes to the workplace and so on. But yeah, this is the good coach.
Well, he said something earlier on before we went for a break, that in the past, for instance, people would be employed but be given a lot of time off to train and prepare themselves for competitions, right? And that makes a difference in the life of an athlete, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's why our students at universities are still able to train properly, because they have some time off, you know, and schedule their classes around training. But once, you know, you fall behind your peers and you start thinking, well, I need to get a job. Once you're in that workplace, it's very difficult to participate in sport full time. And especially in these days, you know, it's absolutely professional. You need to spend hours and hours and hours preparing for competitions. So it's absolutely important that we as a country, and as not just the structures, but even the business side, you know, and the commercial world, try and assist our athletes. You know, they've got to train. They can't work full time, but they need to be assisted financially to be able to do their sport full time.
And at the same time, we expect the athletes, in terms of athletics, to perform and deliver the medals, and they try and they don't succeed. We blame them, and we don't blame the administrators or the sponsors or whoever the authorities are who could be helping. And I want to bring the discussion to the national teams. Now, I can tell you that there's a lot of unhappiness in football circles in particular, where football fans feel that they are being hard done by. They love their football, but they're not getting the goods. What do you think might be going on there? I mean, including the coverage of the sport for that matter.
Well, they got to create something exciting when people go to the stadiums, like what we have in the United States in San Diego with the San Diego Padres. It's a baseball team. Now, the guy that's in charge of marketing the stadium, he had to think to himself, now, how do I get the people off the beach into the stadium? So he had to be very clever, because people like to spend time on the beach and, you know, eat there and have fun with their loved ones. Now he had to take them from the beach and bring them into the stadium. And you have to do things, family things in the stadiums. You got to make it attractive and fun to go watch the event. And I think that's what's lacking here. A lot of branding and marketing and events in these big stadiums and so on.
Well, but that's strange. I mean, we follow what's going on. Manchester United, everybody knows something about it. Arsenal's, the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas of this world, the Bayern Munichs of this world. I mean, lessons are there, and yet we're not doing. Any thoughts?
Well, I want to agree with Ray. You know, I saw a couple of football matches just in the last week in South Africa, in you know, big derbies and stuff, and also, you know, rugby matches, which supposedly normally you look at, you know, Currie Cup finals and test matches, and it's usually sold out. Football matches sold out. and I guarantee you they're not sold out anymore. I'm actually shocked just in the last couple of weeks how empty our stadiums are. So somewhere along the line, somebody is not doing their jobs, you know, and as Ray said, it's not marketed properly. But I do think the media plays a role as well. You know, maybe we've come to the point where you see it in the States, for instance, and you see it in Europe as well, where in the immediate area around a particular match or stadium, there will be a block on live broadcasting in that area, so it actually forces people to go and watch matches within a certain range around the stadium, and that happens in the States, you know. But I do think the media plays a huge role, and I think in this modern time, especially also with live streaming and so on, and I also want to mention something about millennials, you know, in the terms of instant gratification, you could call it. Live sport on television and live streaming is so important. And what we see in South Africa with some of our major sports are that the right holders of the broadcasts are broadcasting the events 3 days later, or maybe on the same day, but it's midnight and nobody's watching. So the people are finding it hard to, you know, to get sponsors. They're finding it hard to market the sport when it's not done live. So I do think we need to take hands in this country, right through from Department of Sport and Government and SASCOC, but right through to the people on the ground. Like Ray said, the guy at the stadium in San Diego had to make a plan to fill up the stadium. And that's what we need, a system where everybody takes hands and try and promote sport. But just one last thing on your question initially about what it means for our children is just don't forget the whole health side as well, because it's so important that our kids participate in sport. For me, it's fantastic to see primary schools where kids are still outside doing sport, and sometimes not even sport. They're climbing trees and you know, just running around and playing. But they barefoot many times, which I think developmentally speaking is very important. I think you get a lot of benefits from growing up and playing barefoot. I think we've got a lot of grass. I think that's important, not doing everything on synthetic tracks and on the road. So I do think we've got a lot of things going for us in South Africa.
I feel very strongly too about that fact that, you know, we must allow and give children an opportunity to play. Somehow. They don't have to grow up to become professionals, but every human being must have memories of the time when they were children and they were playing with their friends. But it's a very lonely road to the top, isn't it, for those who end up being elite athletes of the world. How lonely is the road, and what does it take, Ray, to become a top-performing athlete overall?
Oh, a lot of dedication, a lot of planning. But I want to touch on life after university, because that's a problem we have. I mean, because there's no support financially and so on. But I've been trying to implement this for 25 years in South Africa. It's called the Olympic Jobs Opportunity Program in the United States. And you know who spearheaded it was Sidney Marie, and he's here in South Africa. Let me explain what it does. Is say you have a finance background and you get a degree from university and you want to work for a bank. You go in there at 10 o'clock instead of 8 or 7 o'clock, and you work till 1. But you get paid, Tim, for 8 hours. So now you're learning to trade while you're preparing for the Olympics or any sport at all. So when you're finished, you have a proper job. And what's happening with some of our athletes, they don't even get a chance because they can't support themselves. They can't, so they just fall away. They fall away, and the great ones are falling away now. University's fine because the university is taking care of everything, but it's after university, and those are the prime years of 21, 22, 23.
But how can a business be involved in such a program? Because I don't think many people are aware or have thought about it in that sense. You know, we understand business role to be more in the place of sponsorships, and companies compete for them. So it's only a few big companies that can participate in supporting sport.
There's about 60 companies in the United States that are part of the Olympic Jobs Opportunity Program, and it's a tax write-off also for the company. And it's a wonderful program. Even England put the program into place, I think, 6 or 8 years ago, and look how well they did in the Olympic Games. But you need to have something other than sport to get your mind off of it. And to work 2 or 3 hours a day, it's really nothing.
But then, going back to the original question of the loneliness of becoming an elite athlete. Jean, you'd like to share with me, you were mentioning Caster Semenya earlier on, and we know that she's had a fair share of attacks that may have been demoralizing, but she seems to have come back again, up again,
Strong.
and doing very well. But she's amongst the few who've been able to recover from that, right? And I'm also interested in what happens to the ones who were like number 2, number 3, and never really got to the top. What happens to them ultimately?
Well, the loneliness is definitely true. I'll tell you one of the things about these top athletes that people would not understand. One, you know, they have to see it to believe it, is their commitment and their hard work. You know, they work extremely hard. I mean, Caster, for instance, she's extremely dedicated. Every single session that we discussed and that she had to do, she did it. You know, and she's in the gym a couple of hours almost every single day. You know, through injuries, we had some problems with injuries where she didn't take no for an answer. She ran through the injuries. That was in the Olympic year, and it's important to have that absolutely dedication and commitment to what you're doing. And as Ray said, you know, most people in that, if you don't have a good sponsor like Costa had with Nike, they can't afford it, because they have to go and find something.
So
but
business somewhere must come to the
but
party.
As you said, you're actually correct when you say, in athletics anyway, the people who are just behind them, the second and third and fourth placed athletes, really have it even tougher, because they don't have those Nikes that can look after them in many cases.
And I didn't even get to my point about the very interesting conversation we've had about hosting of major events by nations, because some have been bankrupted, unfortunately. I'm thinking of Greece here. And here in South Africa, people ask, of course we had fun, we had the World Cup, but what happened after that? Well, that's a topic for next time then. We'll focus on that. And thanks again for having been my guests.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
And Ray and Jean, my guests here on the Modise Network. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And from us, enjoy the rest of the day until next week.